Manchester. I am State Representative Heidi Hamer, and I represent Ward 10 in Manchester, District 17, Hillsborough. Today I have the privilege to introduce you to Jerome Duvall, who is one of the Democratic candidates for Executive Council, District 4, in the September 8th primary. So Jerome is a New Hampshire native. He grew up on the west side of Manchester. Jerome has been very involved in the community. He previously served on the Manchester School Board, Board of Mayor and Alderman, the City Planning Board, and was on the Board of Directors of Catholic Medical Center. Additionally, he served as president of the Greater Manchester-Nashua Board of Realtors. Welcome, Jerome.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Yes.
Yep.
Well, let's start off. Tell us why you're running for Executive Council.
That's a good place to start. I was not planning on being on the ballot at all in 2020. And as things unfolded, and unfortunately, Kelly Boyer, a very dedicated, hardworking select woman from Goffstown, had put together a campaign, had reached out to a lot of people. I was on board. I was supporting her candidacy. And unfortunately, due to the effects of COVID, she's fine, she's well and everything, but due to the effects of COVID and things that happened in her life, she was forced to end her campaign very abruptly. And it was just at the start of getting close to filing period. A handful of people reached out to me and asked me to consider running. I in turn did the same thing. I reached out to other people to see if they had an interest in running. And as things worked out, I took a hard look at it, and it seemed to make sense. At this point in my life, I'm ready for a big birthday come January. I won't say how old I'll be, but I'm just in a position now in my life to step from the sidelines and contribute. And this was, it seemed logical, and it seemed to be fitting that I run for council. So that's where we're at.
Good, thank
Yep.
you. Jerome, the Executive Council, what is that? And not a lot of people know about it. Executive Council is kind of unique to New Hampshire.
Yep.
And what are the responsibilities?
Constitutionally known as the Executive Council, commonly known as the Governor's Council. 5-member council, so there's 5 districts throughout New Hampshire, representing approximately the same amount of population, supposed to anyway by census. About 260,000 residents are represented in each district by their own council member. And it was constitutionally established to serve as a check on the governor. And limited in role to a certain extent. We're not a legislative body in that we don't enact laws, we don't create the budgets. We're kind of down, I call it sort of downstream from the legislative process. So that responsibility rests with you competent legislators, Patty and Connie and yourself. And then we end up with the budget, and we're told how much we can spend, or the governors, they can spend. But we are there to weigh in and on state contracts, anything in excess of $10,000. Very importantly, and I've talked about it quite a bit since I got into the race, and you'll continue to hear about this as a main issue of mine, appointment of judges. So the Executive Council can acts on the nominees put forth by the governor and can turn down, as we know, with the Attorney General McDonald nominee process. The council has tremendous authority in saying yes or no to the nominees the governor brings forth. Which brings me to a point, if you don't mind, if I can segue into one of my campaign platforms, is that the bench has not been terribly diverse since it was established 144 years ago. And I think it's regrettable, and frankly, it's unacceptable. About 116 Supreme Court justices have been named to the bench in its 144-year history. All but 3 have been men. Now, I understand that, during the course of our history in New Hampshire, given our demographics here, I can understand that to a point. But where's the commitment now? Where's the effort now to change the pathway so that we end up with a more diverse bench? A bench that's much more representative of what we have now for today in New Hampshire for our population. Better than 50% of our population is women.
Yeah.
And yet the bench has only 3 in its history, 144 years, 1 currently serving. It's a 5-member bench. It's unacceptable. And by the way, the Superior Court in New Hampshire, consisting of about 26 justice positions. There's only 6 of the 26 that are currently women. So they're not faring much better. So the diversity is lacking, and I think that an executive council could play a pivotal role. And I understand the argument is, and I had this recently with my opponent in the primary, his position was, well, the governor makes the nominees for the bench. That's true. But a council, if proactive, can play a significant role in changing the process. It should not be exclusive to only white men who are politically connected to be considered for the bench. I think that it should be a much more open process, much more engaged, and I think that in a sense the council districts throughout New Hampshire should serve as a feeder to the governor in terms of potential, those that are qualified to be nominated. Involve the community more. And I think in that way we end up with a bench that I think is much more, it's important to our judicial system, it really is.
So that
Didn't want to get on a tangent, but
that's okay. That was one of my questions here. Judicial appointments fall under the responsibility of the executive council, and you told me all about what your qualities and the skills would be for that. Thank you.
Sure.
So let's talk about contracts. You know, with your experience being on the school board, mayor and alderman board, and now with your real estate, you must deal a lot with contracts.
I do, and I've had that experience, as you pointed out. My experience on the school board, I was in the principal negotiating team. You know, we had to deal with contracts a lot, and also the size and magnitude of these budgets are very involved, so I have that background and experience, and also there's a professional element. I work with a lot of attorneys in my profession as a real estate broker, so I do have exposure to contracts. But I've said it, and I mean this sincerely. Look, I've never said I'm the smartest guy in the room. And I do believe that in government, especially in a position like this, there is some learn as you go. The question is, you know, are you the right person who's going to ask the tough questions? Do you know what questions to ask to get the information that you're looking for that's most important to your constituents when it comes to the I's being dotted and T's crossed in these contracts and how the money's being allocated? So I think to me, that's the more important question. You can always get assistance from people that are smarter than you about any subject matter. That's life. And the question I think voters should ask themselves in the Democratic primary is who's better suited to do that. My opponent has tremendous experience being head of a large union for most of his career. So he has seen some things that I haven't seen. He brings that experience to the table. That's great. But the question is, I think, is who has the better temperament to be able to reach across the aisle, to be able to work with a governor that the people elect in New Hampshire, be they Republican or Democrat. I think it requires a certain presence about you. I think it's one thing to be able to pound your fist on the table when necessary, but I think more importantly than that, you have to be able to dig in and do the homework. I did say, and I don't mean to drop names, but that's what I admired about Chris Pappas when he was a counselor. Chris was not necessarily a lightning rod all the time. I thought he was effective because he did his homework. He's extremely bright. And I would hope to emulate some of that style as well if I'm elected counselor. So that's my take on it.
Chris is a favorite of mine too. Yes. So.
Still is.
So let's go on. You know, there's been a lot of discussion about the pandemic and how the governor's been handling it. And do you think the executive council should have had more, larger play in it and some of the decisions that the governor has already made? You know, isn't...
Look, I think that in the role of executive counselor, if you want to be proactive, it's one thing, as I said, I pride myself in being able to bridge the divide between the two parties. But I do think there are instances, especially with what you're referring to, the $1.25 billion that came to New Hampshire and the pandemic relief aid package. And I think the governor made a mistake. I think he was wrong. Let me be very plain about it. There should have been a much more open and transparent process. if only for the sake of good governance and the appearance of good ethics, open it up. I don't like the idea of closed door, anything. I don't practice that in my day-to-day business as a real estate professional. And you wouldn't expect that from me if I was elected your governor's counselor, especially when it comes to government spending. Key legislators at least should have been involved, both from the House and Senate side. And I think people from outside the process should have been involved too. Like I said, there's tremendous wealth of knowledge from other people that don't necessarily have the time or desire to serve, but they're accessible, right? Plenty of bright people out there, and I think it was a mistake, and I would have called the governor out on it if I was sitting in that position.
Yeah, because he shouldn't have had so much power, where he has his executive council that he relies on for help.
Exactly. I think certainly if you're looking to create opportunity to have a synergy with the council that you're elected to serve with, I think a minimum amount of decorum is to at least give the appearance that you're willing to work with them, right? Engage them in the process. And that's what I'm talking about. It's not, putting partisan politics aside, this pandemic doesn't know party lines. It could care less. It's wreaking havoc in the lives of many, many people. It's costing people their life's fortunes, their jobs, their health. And it should have been, as far as I'm concerned, out of the political arena and managed in such a way that was much more engaging and a much more open process. I think, like I said, I think it was a mistake, and I would have called them out.
So, if you were elected, how would you interact and stay in touch with your constituents?
One of the primary responsibilities and roles of an executive council, I think, is to reach back into the communities they serve. Now, the 4th Council District has 18 towns and 1 city, Manchester.
Quite spread all
around.
It
is. That's right. That's right. It's spread all around, down to Londonderry and then towards the coast, Barrington and Lee and Nottingham and west over to Bow and then Bedford. It's spread out. It's, like I said, 260,000 some odd residents who live in the district. And I think it's incumbent upon the council, I think, to keep abreast of what's going on the local level. And all these towns and municipalities within the district have pressing concerns. I've been invited by selectmen to go in and speak before their boards, and I think it takes a commitment to do that, to reach back and to speak with people that are at the local level, to find out what the interest level is, what issues they're being confronted with, and how the council can best facilitate a process to affect change or to assist and aid the communities in any way possible. That's vital. It's another reason why I think you can't have someone that's so dead set on any issue. There has to be some pliability. That's what government's all about. Should be what it's about, I think. So that you can work with people when it comes to getting the job done for your constituents.
Reminds me of autism. Somebody that has autism, the window is either all the way open or all the way shut.
Exactly.
There's no in between. You have to be kind of
That's right.
flexible.
That's right. You do. You have to be pliable. I think stand for what you stand for.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid of it. Don't be ashamed of it. Don't run from it. I think that's really good. I said during a recent forum that one of my most prized mentors in politics, and I mean this sincerely, happened to be a Republican executive counselor. Ray Burton was dedicated for decades as an executive counselor, and I remember as a young guy reaching out to him, and I forget what it was for, but here I am from Manchester, and I'm reaching out to a counselor from way up north, and he got back to me with a handwritten note in his business card saying, "Hey, call me anytime. I'm going to try to get you this information." I was very much impressed by that. He wasn't even my counselor to begin with. Here I am from Manchester. I'm viewed as the city guy, and he's up north in the small towns. The point is that he looked beyond partisan politics, and he wanted to do what was right and in the best interest of people. And I think Ray, over his career, demonstrated that by supporting causes on both sides of the aisle. And he was very successful at doing it during a time when the North Country was ultra conservative. So they reelected him, and they rewarded him with reelection because he did a good job.
I know you're very well known in Manchester and surrounding, and
That's what happens
selling
when you're.
real
That's what happens when
estate.
you're getting ready to hit a milestone birthday. That's what happens.
And you graduated from West High, did you?
I did.
Yes,
Go
I
Blue.
did too.
That's right.
Yes,
That's right.
and yeah, and it's all changed there now.
A lot of changes, and I pride myself with the fact that I've lived on both sides of the city by now, both sides of the river, and went to West High School. But I represented Ward 10 on the school board.
Yeah.
Represented Ward 4 as an alderman. And I've been elected to the Charter Commission citywide, and so roots that go pretty deep now. And I remember being in the kitchen at Patty's mother's house years ago. I forget who I was supporting. An old friend of mine, Leo Bernier, and I went over there to see Viola about something to have to do with the campaign. I remember Judy when she was just a young teenager. And I served with Viola, her mother, on the school board. That's when a time when her mother was smoking, and they were still smoking in the school administration building. And you could not tell her mother not to smoke, I'll tell you. Viola would
Oh, my goodness.
she'd tell you, give you a piece of her mind. Times have changed, but Manchester has been good to me, and I'm hoping to do well here in the city. That's a big part of the district.
Yes.
Between Manchester, Hooksett, and Goffstown and Bedford, just about close to 2/3 of the vote.
Yeah.
So obviously having Greater Manchester and some familiarity with, is important. It's going to play a big role.
So when you were in Ward 4 as your alderman, you also had Jeromes Deli on Bridge Street. I
Good
drive
memory.
by that every single day, it seems like, to go up to my son's house. And,
Good memory.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a dilapidated little corner store, and my wife and I bought it. We recreated it into more of a deli and catering format. We created it, restored the building, and eventually sold it to a gentleman by the name of Jerome, so that it carries on my name. We had it as Dairyfield Deli, under the park, and the original, of course, Manchester originally was Dairyfield.
Yeah.
But we sold it to a gentleman, and as just luck would have it, I guess, his name was Jerome as well.
Good.
And
Is he still the current owner?
He's still the current owner.
Oh,
He's
good.
still there. We sold it 15 years ago.
Wow.
Hard to believe, yeah. So I've been in the real estate business full time as a broker now for that time. Yep.
Well, I'm kind of boring. I've always lived on the west side at Ward 10, and you were my school board member way back.
Social media right now is the primary format for campaigning with the pandemic, safe distancing and all, no shaking hands and all that stuff. It's hard for us politicians because we can't really shake hands, and knocking on doors right now is kind of not a good thing to do. I had a young lady reach out to me through Facebook who still lives in Manchester, and she remembers that I knocked on her mother's door. She had just turned 18 and was getting to vote for the first time in a municipal election. And she reached out and said, I remember you knocked on my door and you asked me for my vote. And she said, now I'm happy to support you for governor's council, all these years ago.
Wow.
April King Broderick, if you're listening, I'm mentioning your name
yes.
tonight.
Her
So-
mother works at the polls with us. She's a ballot inspector.
April still remembers that
Yeah.
visit.
Marie.
I have to be honest with you, I vaguely do. I do remember
Yes.
her in
Yes.
particular, and I remember visiting the house. I can kind of remember where it is. Is her mother still there?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
No kidding.
Patterson Street, I think it is.
Yeah,
or-
yeah. Okay,
in
there you
that
go.
area.
There you go. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice people. Very nice people.
Very nice people.
Yeah.
I'm going to see her mother tomorrow, Marie.
No kidding.
Yeah, we're going to go to
Tell-
City Hall. We have to count our ballots, get them
Okay.
ready. I'm also the ward clerk in Ward 10, so
Yes, I tell you, that is a tough
yeah,
position right
it's
now.
going to be hard.
Hats off to the people that are running the
Yes.
elections.
Yes.
Yeah, my dad did it for years in Ward 12 many years ago,
Mm-hmm.
back in the 70s and through the Reagan Revolution, and I remember those days back then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up, we have a couple more minutes.
Sure.
Any final thoughts on your campaign? I know you're doing social media, and you're getting a lot of publicity that way. People are coming out of the woodwork and saying, "Oh, I know him," and supporting you.
It's been a humbling experience, and I'm very, very grateful. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention again Kelly Boria, because she had campaigned for months and put together a very viable, very credible campaign. And I'd followed the campaign, and I had embraced her candidacy. She was developing a tremendous amount of enthusiasm, and for a young lady, she's taking on a guy that's been around, like Ted Gatzis, who has plenty of reserves in the tank, so to speak.
Oh, yes.
You know, it was quite a formidable undertaking that she was prepared to do. And then to just be hit like that, it was really, I think, must have been heart-wrenching an experience. And I know it was. I met with her after and before I filed. In fact, I sought her counsel at the time that I had decided to run. And so hats off to her. But yeah, social media is kind of interesting, and I'm not unfamiliar. It's not unfamiliar to me because, of course, I do some of it with my business. That's the way people engage these days. And I think for a community, I do follow Facebook. There's, Patty's husband Rick posts quite a bit, and I enjoy keeping in touch with people that way, even if it's from the distance. Mm-hmm. You're kind of peering in through the window to see how people are doing and what they're up to and the various stories they share about their lives. It's a way to follow people and engage. The number of people that have come back to me through social media that I haven't seen in years is just, even if I don't succeed, I'm happy to do that. It's been worthwhile. Mm-hmm. And I mean that sincerely. I've never set out to be a career politician. It's just not in my DNA. I take my hat off to people that do it. People like Gene Shaheen and others that I met Gene Shaheen years ago when I was a kid campaigning for John Durkin for the U.S. Senate when I was just a little kid. That's not been the path that I took in life. I do think now that I'm in a position to serve, this is one way I can do it effectively. I think it's really kind of tailor-made for someone that has my skill set, personality, my temperament. But the people that have reached out through social media, people that I haven't seen in years, teachers and faculty from West, incredible show of support. It's gratifying, and I think when voters head to the polls, I think there is something to consider when you're looking at a candidate. I think a part of it, anyway, a piece of the pie, is looking at who they're with, so to speak, who they're surrounded by, and that's one thing I've always prided myself in. And that's what makes it so humbling, and I'm so grateful for the people that have come forward to support me. A bunch of really, really good people. And I'm happy to get the endorsement of Ray Chynoweth. Ray Chynoweth has been a great advisor. He was the nominee for council 2 years ago.
Yes.
Exceptionally bright young man. Has built a couple of companies now. Obviously, technology is his thing. We're on opposite ends of the spectrum with that. But he's just a great sounding board. He's given me great advice, and I'm really honored to have his endorsement. Yeah.
I have a Gene Shaheen story. Years ago, there was we were meeting the Moore Center. We had a pie baking contest. There was only a few entries, but I entered my special apple pie, and she was one of the judges, and I got second place.
No kidding.
So I'll always remember that.
She liked your pie.
Yes.
That's great.
Yes. We've always been a big supporter of Gene Shaheen's too. Yes.
Yeah. Campaigns were so much different then. I remember, speaking of John Durkin's campaign, I don't know if Patty might remember this, Connie maybe, but on North Elm Street, I think it was the old Red Cross building, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe it was a building that's now gone. Yeah. But I remember walking there as a kid, and it was just, all these rooms were all loaded with volunteers. Yeah. And Dick Dunphy was there, and Donnie Langdon, and some throwbacks that were involved heavily in Democratic politics back in the day. And it was people licking stamps, licking envelopes, stuffing envelopes. Yeah. I mean, all the signs were put together by hand. There was none of this plastic stuff. A lot of them were painted by hand.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it was just such and phone banks, literally desks, long tables with phones, people making calls. Just such a different environment now. It's changed so dramatically.
Yes.
It's so different. So different. You kind of miss some of that close person-to-person contact,
Back then, my husband Gary and John Hopwood, who were stealing his show.
Yeah. Thanks, John.
Thank you, John. They used to work on the campaigns too, and the stories they had back then, they loved it too. And
much more.
Still on it.
Yeah. It's one thing. It's a little bit, and I think any candidate, you were able to speak, whether it be Gene Shaheen or people that have been around a long time. Part of that element, I think, is lost. I think, there's a heavy influence of money, and I think it's really, you have to always be vigilant. I think about bringing it back to the people. and making sure that they have a stake in this process as best you can. It shouldn't be all about outside influence. I know money's a very real thing, and you have to fund campaigns, and it's a challenge for candidates to do. It's just the reality of where we're at today. But I think if you can try to create those connections with people as much as you can along the way, I think it's really important. Yeah.
We have a few more minutes. Just tell me about your background growing up in Manchester. You were in Ward 12, you said?
Grew up in Ward 12. Back then, there was a big, you remember, cultural divide back in Manchester back in the day. I grew up at a time when a tremendous amount of people, especially in Ward 12 and 11, were bilingual.
Oh, yes.
My relatives all migrated from Canada, and but interestingly, I started my primary education at St. Patrick's. My folks ended up at St. Patrick's Parish, and my siblings and I ended up at St. Patrick's until it closed, and then ended up at Goslar Parkton. It was, I think it was 4th and 5th grade, if I'm not mistaken. Mr. Oleniak, I'll never forget him. Wonderful teacher. And then Parkside Junior High School, one of my most ardent supporters, Jocelyn Messier.
Oh, yes.
Got a nice card in the mail from her yesterday. She's running for state rep over in Deerfield.
Yes. And
Go Jocelyn.
I work with Christopher at the polls. He's the moderator. I'm the ward clerk.
Exactly. And of course, their mother was a state rep.
Irene, yes.
And this, speaking of which, just real quick story. There's another person who Republican, if you remember, Irene Messier, was a state rep from Ward 10, which was predominantly Democratic back in the day. Still is.
Yes.
And yet Irene got elected over and over again.
Irene was a sweetheart.
She was a sweetheart, but very pragmatic and able to hold her own positions.
Yeah.
Women's issues were very important to her. She was ahead of her time, I think, for this area. And you could work with someone like Representative Messier. Good luck to Jocelyn over in Deerfield. She's got a tough road.
I didn't realize she never drove, but she would always be able to make it up to the State House.
Right.
Through rides.
She had a good son in Christopher, I'll tell you.
Yes.
Christopher was very, very dedicated and loyal to his mother. Good for him.
Yes. The whole family is wonderful.
Yeah. Just, I don't know how much time we have. A couple of minutes. There's one thing I did want to share because one of my experiences on the school board, and I regret that sometimes it escapes me, but I was on the school board in the late '80s, and it's relevant now because of all the tension we have right now with the call for social justice reform. And I was on the school board when it was brought up that the Manchester schools would have a holiday in honor of Martin Luther King. Tremendously controversial. It just goes to show how far we've come. Still far to go, obviously. But it was an absolute all-out battle. And the experience came back to me in a wave because I went to the Black Lives Matter vigil at Stark Park. And it was such an impressive gathering. For people that have not attended one, I would just take a step back and maybe consider going just once. Because what I thought I was going to experience, I didn't experience at all. You could hear a pin drop. It was outdoors, of course, Stark Park. It was dark out. And you could hear a pin drop and just hear the rustling of the leaves. And I was just moved by the presentations given by the young people, story after story after story. And these were people that were within our community, kids that were brought up and raised here and gone through our public school system. Some of them just horrifying, but heart-wrenching. And it came over me like a wave that, reaching back to my history being on the school board when the Martin Luther King holiday was brought up. And I remember getting home as a young parent then. I had 2 young children who were now in their 30s. And we had the voice machines. We didn't have now through, right? They were press the button and run. And I remember getting home after long meetings at the school board and hearing messages from people that just weren't very nice. So we've come a long way. We have a long ways to go.
Yes.
It's been a pleasure being here.
Thank you. And best of luck on September 8th.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Get out and vote.
Get out
Jerome
and
Duvall,
vote.
Executive Council. Thank
Get
you.
your absentee ballot.
Yep.
Thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Thank you.